Okay, today I wanted to talk a little bit about Bulova. So, Bulova, unfortunately, up until recently, had changed its reputation from what it once was, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, to being that of mall watches. And what I mean by mall watches, these are watches that you would buy at a mall. And the reason that that's not generally accepted as a good thing in the watch community is most of the things you see at the mall, they're going to be Movados, they're going to be some Citizens, they're going to be some Bulovas, and these are going to be the ones that are marketed towards people that aren't really into watches but want to wear a watch as a piece of jewelry and not necessarily as a way to tell time. Nothing that is has an intricate movement generally, or they may have fake diamonds or fake gold. These are things that people in the watch community generally thumb their nose at, and I'm one of them. I'm not going to look down on what you wear, but it's definitely not my taste, unless you wear an Invicta, in which case we need to have a talk. So, I would like to focus on something that they've done right. The Bulova's Heritage line, where they're bringing back some of these pieces that made them famous back in the day. I have 3 examples here. But before I get into those, I want to talk about what Bulova used to be. What got Bulova to the point that they became a powerhouse for a very long time before the quartz crisis. And if you don't know what the quartz crisis was, back in the late 70s, I believe, Seiko introduced the world's first quartz watch. And once this happened, so up until this point, you had manual and some automatic winding. So you had to have your watch serviced fairly often. You had to set it every day. Manual winds, you had to wind throughout the day. This wasn't horrible, but it wasn't necessarily ideal. When quartz watches came along, they were powered by a battery. They didn't require really any servicing. The only thing you had to do was change the battery, and they were extremely accurate. There was very little beat error. If you know anything about stacking tolerances or things of that nature, kind of similar in that regard, if you have a very slight beat error, but the watch beats 8 times per second, that stacks up, right? And then over time, you're losing more time, whereas a quartz watch is generally more accurate. So that really destroyed almost the Swiss watch industry. A lot of your manufacturers that were in America ended up being bought by bigger corporations before they went under. Those that could survive moved to Switzerland. But you had Hamilton that was U.S. based. I believe Ball was part of this as well at this time. Both were acquired. Let me take that back. Ball is still owned by Ball, but I think they are based out of Switzerland. I'll have to go back and double check on that. Hamilton was bought by the Swatch Group, who coincidentally basically saved Swiss watchmaking. Bulova was acquired. I'll tell you what. Let's just go through the whole timeline. Normally, these are things that I know off the top of my head. Bulova has such a rich history that it's hard to remember it all. So I'm going to go through what I can, but we'll go through the timeline that I kind of put together. So founding, 1875, Joseph Bulova. He was a Bohemian immigrant, founded the J. Bulova Company in New York City. Originally this was just jewelry and clock repair. At the time, watches weren't really a thing in 1875. There's argument as to who made the first one, but they weren't really mass produced. 1911, Joseph began making table clocks and pocket watches. 1912, he opens a factory in Biel, Switzerland, dedicated to standardized mass production of watches. So in 1923, reincorporated as the Bulova Watch Company. This marks their full transition into watchmaking. 1926, the world's first radio commercial, quote unquote, at the tone, it's 8 o'clock, Bulova Watch Time. So that's the first radio commercial was Bulova. 1927, built an observatory atop 585th Avenue in New York City to precisely measure universal time. 1927, sponsored Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight, gifting him the Lone Eagle watch. 1941, ran the world's first television commercial, a 10-second spot on WNBT in New York. This is where it gets even more interesting, war efforts. 1939-1945, World War II produced military-grade wristwatches, aviation instruments, and navigation tools for the U.S. Armed Forces. They did this along with Hamilton. Hamilton's more well known for this, but Bulova was very much a part of this. If you've ever seen the A11, that was them. 1960 introduced the Accutron, the world's first fully electronic watch using a tuning fork to timekeeping, a major leap in horology. If you've ever seen an Accutron, it's quite interesting, and these precisionist movements mimics something similar to that. So when we talked about acquiring, I talked about the quartz crisis. In 1979, they were acquired by the Lowe's Corporation, L-O-E-W-S, not Lowe's Home Improvement. That, mixed results there. But eventually, in 2007, they were sold to Citizen Watch Company, who owns, strangely enough, Citizen Watches. 2020, they revived some Art Deco models like the Banker and the Commodore in the Joseph Bulova collection. And this is roughly the time when we started seeing these heritage lines. There were quite a few. We'll talk about these three in particular today. So first, the Bulova Lunar Pilot. Man, I am mincing my words today, guys. It was a tough day at work. I'm struggling. 90% of me doing this is because I've had a rough day and I just need to do something. Plus, I hope one day when my son inherits all these watches that he can go back and look at this. So forgive all of my word mincing. So Apollo 15, I think you can see it there maybe. So what happened with the Lunar Pilot? Omega made the Speedmaster, right? It was first watch into space. First U.S. watch into space. First U.S. watch to at least get on the moon. We'll say that, not necessarily in space. So they had done that in another trip as one of the astronauts. I forget his name. I had it handy and I've already forgotten. One of the other pilots is getting ready to launch this mission, and his Omega Speedmaster quits. He happens to have a Bulova Lunar Pilot in a bag that Bulova had given to him. It was a prototype. He grabs it and says, let's see. Takes it with him. That watch survived in space and came back home. It was on the moon, the only other moon watch. So there's a lot of history there. It's a really cool watch. We talked about the chronograph function in the previous episode, but still, it's hard not to like seeing that 1/10 of a second hand flying. So we're going to enjoy that for a second. It's quite a large watch. So let me take this Baltic off that I'm wearing. We'll do some wrist shots just so you can get an idea. I have a 7.5 inch wrist, so this guy is pretty chunky. Fits great though with that Islander bracelet. So yeah, a lot of history tied to that model. The Bulova Jetstar. You saw this one in the last video as well. So this is also another reissue. The Jetstar was a huge hit for Bulova back in the day. In both of these, sorry about that. In both of these, you can see they're rocking the precisionist movement. You're seeing the 262 kilohertz, where they're using 3 quartz crystals to jump and amplify the amount of times that hand beats per second through the roof, which is why it's so smooth, so buttery smooth. It's gorgeous dial on this thing, by the way. Absolutely beautiful. So, not a lot more to say about that watch other than it's a fantastic watch. The Oceanographer, aka the Devil Diver. So I'm gonna move this hand. I don't have this time set anyway, so you guys can see what the dial says, and we'll talk about that for a second. So, as you can see, what's printed on the dial: automatic snorkel, 666 feet. So, back in the day, people were a lot more superstitious than they are now. You can kind of tell that in general just by looking at things, media release from back then. Also, check out this Baltic. This little guy is sweet. If you do the math, what this watch was certified at as far as meters in depth was 203 meters. Guess what 203 meters translates out to in feet? 666 feet. So quite a few watches qualify for about 203, but 200 meters is closer, so they just go with, we're going to call it 200 meters. Strangely enough, Bulova was like, well, 666 feet sounds cooler, so we're going to stick with that. And thus, the Devil Diver was born. It's a really cool watch. I do have this one on an aftermarket bracelet, just a beads of ice, just because it felt right. It felt right for the time period. Also another one from their collection. Fantastic bezel. Sounds so good. The indices are like this clear, jeweled almost. It looks fantastic. With that dial, you really get the feeling that you're checking out a vintage piece, even though it's not. Has that cushion case, wears absolutely fantastic. This is similar to the Seiko King Turtle, and really any of the turtles, in that it's not where I'll wear it. It's not anywhere near as big on the wrist as the specs suggest. It's a fantastic piece. The other thing about this product line, very obtainable. These watches in general, $500 to $600, maybe $700, depending on what you buy. There's also a plethora of other pieces from these lines. You have the Mill Ships, which was a prototype diving watch that when the Navy was trying to find scuba diving watches for their, scuba rated watches for SEALs and other units that would do wet works, you would have quite a few people try to enter that realm, right? We want that military contract, so we're going to produce a prototype. The Bulova Mill Ships, unfortunately, was one that was not selected. However, they kept the prototypes around. Somehow, a private collector stumbles upon one, keeps it, and I think it was 3 years ago, maybe 4. I'm not sure. A few years ago, he basically calls up Bulova and says, "Hey guys, I've got one of the original Mill Ship prototypes. Would you guys like to see it?" Of course, we would love to see it. So he brings it in, they check it out, they end up getting his permission to get measurements. They get measurements off this watch and create as close, it's not a 1-to-1, but it's very close to a 1-to-1 of what that original watch was like, and you can buy that thing today in 2 separate models, one with a Sellita, I said that wrong, SW200, I believe, and one with a Miyota 8 series, which the Sellita, it's probably, I hate to say probably worth it because there is quite a bit of a price increase in between the two, but it is the better movement of the two. So we had that. We also have something else we haven't talked about there. We did talk a little bit about Bulova's marketing, how they were the first radio commercial and the first television commercial. They also sponsored people like Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra's show was 100% sponsored by Bulova. He even had a Bulova Time segment. He was wearing Bulova watches on the show. He gifted Bulova watches, so much so that now they've done tribute watches. There's basically a Frank Sinatra line. They have a Summer Breeze watch, Fly Me to the Moon watch. There's also a Rat Pack watch. It's amazing. It's really cool to see Bulova grab their history and get out there and flex it a little bit. And look, the enthusiast crowd is responding to it. So nowadays, when you see somebody with a Bulova, it's not as much that they're wearing a mall watch. I mean, maybe they are, because they do, like Citizen, they do still sell those. And that is frustrating from my standpoint, because they have things like this. These are amazing pieces. These are pieces that are affordable. You can get these. These two don't require a lot of upkeep. You just got to change a battery. This guy, automatic Miyota 8 series, kind of similar to a Seiko. They're going to run. It's not going to be the prettiest or the most accurate, but you're still going to get accuracy with this guy for an automatic that's acceptable. These guys, you're going to get outstanding accuracy. The only time I have to reset either one of these two is during daylight savings time, and I don't lose a minute. Heck, I don't lose very many seconds. The original claim for the Precisionist was 10 seconds a year. They've since brought that down to 5 seconds or less a month, but many people reporting 10 seconds a year or better. So if you're getting anywhere between minus let's say 60 seconds a year and minus 10 seconds a year, if we split the hairs there, we're still looking at an insanely accurate watch, right? There's all kind of stuff out there that Bulova makes that's fantastic. Sorry for all the shadows. I'm trying shooting in different locations just to see what I like. So maybe I've noticed that the shadows aren't the best. Unless I start doing shadow puppets. That might be cool. Anyways, so that I don't continue to ramble incessantly, I'm going to wrap up. But what I will say is, Citizen, Bulova, these guys, they cut their teeth a long time ago on some really cool stuff. And just because they do make some mall watches nowadays, I don't think that means that we have to disqualify them. I think they've got fantastic stuff out there for the enthusiast. As we get farther and farther into my collection, you'll see watches that cost a little bit more and a little bit more, and maybe some that cost quite a bit more. But I'm starting out in the things that I really enjoy, that are affordable, that anybody can go grab. I know when you first get into a watch, $100 seems like a lot for a watch, and sometimes it is. And in that case, you can still buy a G-Shock, and man, that thing is God tier watch. It will do any and everything you need it to do. Some of them are solar powered, some of them are atomic solar powered. They'll do whatever you need. They'll set themselves for daylight savings times. They'll set themselves when you're in a different time zone. Automatically. That's pretty cool. At least at 2 o'clock in the morning when they send out the radio signal. But if you decide to step into, depending on if you buy these gray market or somewhere like Joma Shop, or if you were to buy them brand new even, you can catch them on sale all day long. And the crazy thing is, since they are kind of marketed towards, I don't want to say mall watches, at least these are marketed towards enthusiasts, where they're sold in malls, you might be able to grab one at a steal at like a K's jeweler. I know I bought this one from a jewelry store online that was marked down for, I think, $400. When these things came out, they were selling for $7, I think. And this was not very long after they came out. So, again, I don't think we should shelf Bulova just because of some of their marketing and some of the watches they make, when they still are starting to realize that catering to the enthusiast crowd pays dividends just as much as catering to the watch people in the mall. So, with that, I'll leave you. I hope that if you found any of this informative, you enjoyed it. If not, I hope maybe you saw something you liked and you'll go search online for some Bulova watches, specifically their Heritage line. Till next time.